The Return of Bridget O'Hara, an Irish ghost tale, author unknown. Long ago, in a small village in Ireland, there lived a handsome farmer by the name of Sean O'Hara. Sean was a wealthy farmer who was quite popular with the townspeople and the young girls, but he was so particular as to whom he courted that he still hadn't found a woman suitable enough to be his wife. Years passed, and no one thought he would ever marry. All that changed, however, when he set eyes on Bridget Flaherty. Bridget had come to Sligo from Galway to visit her aunt and uncle, and Sean had been in the village buying some feed and grain. He saw Bridget walking down the street. When he saw her, his heart skipped a beat. Bridget was the most beautiful woman he had ever seen. She had a beautifully pale, milk-white face, long red hair that glistened in the sun. Her lips were soft, red and full like rose petals, and she had the most beautiful green eyes he had ever seen. They were emerald green and almost seemed to glow with an inner light. After he had found out her name from the clerk in the store, he decided to pay the Flahertys a call. They welcomed him warmly, and after he had settled down at their table for tea, he heard Bridget's voice for the first time. Her voice was sweet and melodious, and he fell deeply in love with her at first sight. Bridget, on the other hand, wasn't too sure about him, however. Yes, he was handsome, but handsome is as handsome does, she had always heard. And so she asked him if he would like to come again and pay her a call. Of course, he said yes. And they met for many weeks after that. Bridget eventually found out that his disposition was as wonderful as his looks. And eventually, just as the summer came to an end, Sean asked Bridget to be his wife. She agreed, and they were married in the village church with the whole town celebrating with music and singing. Sean and Bridget lived together for many happy years. She cared for him like a loving wife was supposed to, and he gave her all the love and tenderness that he could. There were many people in the village who saw their devotion as a sign from God that they were destined to be together. They were often seen in the village walking hand in hand, smiling at each other. At home, Sean would sit in his chair by the fire and read love poems to Bridget, and Bridget would sing old folk songs a cappella. Many times, they would simply sit together and do nothing. Just being together was enough for them. And so it continued for several years, until one day, while returning home from town, Sean heard a crying wail of the banshee. It wailed so mournfully, and he knew that the sound came from his farm. Hurrying the horse and wagon as quickly as he could, he got home and threw open the door. Poor Bridget lay on the floor by the fireplace, staring up into the air with dead eyes. The banshee shrieked once more, and then there was complete silence in the little stone cottage until Sean screamed. They buried Bridget in the graveyard, and Sean was beside himself with grief. He mourned like a madman. He was often seen in the graveyard lying on the grave and crying bitterly. After several months, Sean finally settled down into his routine. It was a year and a day, the date of Bridget's death. Sean was sitting by his fireplace reading his Bible when the front door suddenly burst open with a wild gushing wind, and standing in the door was a figure dressed in a burial shroud. It silently glided in, and the door closed silently behind the advancing figure. The figure walked across the room and sat down across from him. He knew at once, to his horror, that it was Bridget come back from the grave. He stared in horror as the shroud slowly fell away from her head. What he saw shocked him. What sat before him was a rotted corpse. The flesh had been completely eaten away. Her beautiful red lips had been replaced with the grinning teeth of a skull. Her lovely jade green eyes were completely gone, and only two black holes with an eerie green firelight glow stared out at her of her skull. Her red hair had turned a dusky brownish tint, and Sean was filled with loathing. Finally, Sean spoke to the visitor. "Bridget?" Is that you? The figure nodded its head. Bridget, what has happened to your beautiful red hair? The thing looked up at him and said, Gone, faded away. Bridget, what's happened to your beautiful green eyes? Gone, faded away. Bridget, what has happened to your beautiful red lips I used to love to kiss? Gone, faded away. Finally, Sean got up the courage to ask the question he needed answered. Bridget, why have you come back? The figure turned its head in his direction and said, I come for you. The Velvet Ribbon by Anne McGovern. Once, there was a man who fell in love with a beautiful girl, and before the next full moon rose in the sky, they were wed. To please her husband, the young wife wore a different gown each night. Sometimes she was dressed in yellow, other nights she wore red, or blue, or white. And she always wore a black velvet ribbon around her slender neck. Day and night she wore that ribbon, and it was not long before her husband's curiosity got the better of him. Why do you always wear that ribbon, he asked. She smiled a strange smile and said not a word. At last her husband got angry, and one night he shouted at his bride, Take that ribbon off. I'm tired of looking at it. You'll be sorry if I do, she replied. So I won't. Every morning at breakfast, the husband ordered his wife to remove the black velvet ribbon from around her neck. Every night at dinner, he told her the same thing. But every morning at breakfast and every night at dinner, all his wife would say was, You'll be sorry if I do. So I won't. A week had passed. The husband no longer looked into his wife's eyes. He could only stare at that black velvet ribbon around her neck. One night, as his wife lay sleeping, he tiptoed to her sewing basket. He took out a pair of scissors. Quickly and quietly, careful not to awaken her, he bent over his wife's bed and snip went the scissors, and the velvet ribbon fell to the floor. And snap, off came her head. It rolled over the floor in the moonlight, wailing tearfully, I told you, you'd be sorry, you'd be sorry, you'd be sorry.